start recording. So we are now recording and I show at 1 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So anything we say or do right now is going to be seen and heard. So just FYI. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar today. Appreciate everyone coming in. We are going to give it about a minute before we get started, just to allow as many people to join us from the start of the presentation. So bear with us while we do that little bit of a wait. But while we are waiting, go to the chat box and just let us know where you're joining from today. Just type in your city, your state, my house, wherever. We're all probably joining from our house, wherever you would like to share that you're joining from, so we can kind of get a sense as to our audience. Here we go, first one, Charleston, West Virginia. Thanks so much.
Great.
Spokane, Washington, St. Louis, Detroit.
New York in the building. Hi, Suzanne. It's good to see you here.
I see some New York, my neck of the woods.
Yeah, this is great. Lots of different places joining in.
Toronto, we're going international.
Yeah, my hometown. Hello, Toronto.
Wonderful. All right, keep those locations coming. This is just a lot of fun to see where everyone's joining from. But we are kind of at that marker, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So I will take this moment to officially welcome you all to our webinar today. I am Anthony Salas. I'm the event and membership manager with Welcoming America, and very excited that you've joined this webinar titled Fundraising Fears, Moving Beyond Discomfort and Making the Ask. And as many of you know, here at Welcoming America, we do provide a lot of content and information that supports all of the work that all of you out there are doing across the country. And these webinars that we do present to you are just one way that we do that. So I do invite you, if you've not already done so, and any of you that are not members, please go to our website, welcomingamerica.org. You can also go to our resources page where you can use the search function, and if there's anything specific that you would like to look for, get some information about, you can see it on that page there. Very excited to introduce you all to our speakers joining us today. We've got a great panel of individuals that are going to be sharing information with you. We have two great individuals joining us from ioby. We're being joined by Dana Schneider, who is the Community and Growth Manager, and Dawn Arrington, who is the Cleveland Action Strategist. So I guess she's joining from Cleveland, right? But we're really pleased to have both of you joining us today. And many of you may know our third panelist is Leyla Compani, who is the Chief Development Officer with Welcoming America. So we're really excited to have all of them joining us today, and we'll get started with them here shortly. I do want to just mention, though, if any of you have questions as the presentation goes on, please use the chat feature where you're entering your name and your location where you're joining. Enter your questions there. We're going to kind of queue those up. We may try and respond to some of those in the moment, but we will leave some time at the end to go through some questions. And this presentation is going to be somewhat interactive, so be ready to go. And we look forward to that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dana to get us started.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm really so appreciative that you're taking time today to be with us. And first, I'll say I'm suffering with, it seems very minor in this moment, but suffering with seasonal allergies. So you'll forgive my sniffles on the mic. I do want to say, first and foremost, just invite us all to take a breath, to kind of come into this space together. You know, times have been hard for a while now, and they're even harder in the last few days. And so I just want to acknowledge and frame the fact that, you know, in addition to health concerns, economic concerns, all kinds of results of the way that the virus has been hitting our communities around the country, that we need to acknowledge that there's also a surge of injustice and violence happening in our cities and in our towns and communities over these last number of days, and that we feel that. And so we're going to forge ahead talking about why fundraising matters and how you can still be making asks and still be valuing the work of your organization enough to resource it economically in this way. But I don't want to do that without acknowledging that it's hard and that there are ways that we'll have to adjust and acknowledge what's happening in this moment. So, yeah, we know it's hard even in good times. I like to say, like, people don't like to ask when things are great. People look for reasons to shy away from the ask. And now there are lots of reasons to feel like it's inappropriate to do that. So we're here to hold space together, to support you and to talk about that. And like Anthony said, we're going to do some interacting. We're going to share learnings from our experience, best practices that we know as fundraising professionals and coaches. And we're also wanting to hear from you with questions, but also reflections on your own experience. I like to say fundraising is it's more an art than a science. It's hard work, right? It's not magic to get people to give. And so it's about employing, kind of digging deep, employing some of the tactics that we're going to talk about today, and then sticking with it. I look forward to having this conversation with you. I also want you to know that, to say that we need to forge ahead is not to make light of the ways that people are suffering and the real power that money can have in a capitalist society, but to say that we can also make that neutral and not be paralyzed by it. So I'll stop there. I'll have more to say shortly. I'm going to toss it to Dawn in Cleveland, who's our Cleveland action strategist at ioby. And Dawn's going to talk with us a little bit more about what ioby is and what ioby does. And then I'll be back with you to share some more thoughts. Dawn?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. As Dana said, we are in hard times, but we move forward. And I thank you for those comments, Dana. All right, so what is ioby? ioby is a nonprofit crowdfunding platform. So think, other crowdfunding platforms like GoFundMe or Kickstarter, except for we're way more awesome. And one of the reasons that we're way more awesome is because we believe in local knows best, that you, a potential crowdfunding campaign leader, project leader, you know what's best for your community. And so we turn to you as experts to give us guidance about what you want to get done in your community and your neighborhood, broadly defined. So we're more than crowdfunding. We provide coaching, and that's what I do. So some of you may be wondering, what is a Cleveland action strategist? We have action strategists in Detroit, Memphis. We just opened an office in Cincinnati and in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And so what we do is we act as your coach, your one-on-one coach with a lot of times first-time fundraisers to help them learn the best ways to craft and ask, which is what we're talking about today, all the way through like keeping the momentum going and when are the best times to ask people to support their particular project. We can also act as a fiscal sponsor. So we are a national nonprofit and we're in all 50 states plus the US territories. And in doing so, we can act as fiscal sponsors for projects that are crowdfunding with us on the platform. There are some special occasions or special cases where we cannot be the fiscal sponsor, say like if it's a private business, but we as like coaches or connectors in our communities, we can help others find fiscal sponsors that are more aligned with them and find someone that can receive the funds for them. We're committed to positive neighbor-led change and local change. And we work with, oh, it's right here. I didn't even see that. I didn't get to that bullet point. But we work with projects all around the country, but have offices in those places. And yes, we just opened up an office in Cincinnati. And we believe that small is big. Gifts of every size have impact. So whether it's somebody that's donating $5 or somebody that's donating $500, that's a meaningful and impactful gift from that person. And so we believe that it all matters and that it all counts. If we can go to the next slide. So nationally, these are our impact numbers. As you can see, we've raised over $9 million. These are projects all across the country in the U.S. territories. Some of them are as small as $500 I've seen, or $300, and some of them are much, much larger in, you know, the tens of thousands, where groups and residents and individuals and small nonprofits and medium-sized nonprofits are asking their community to support a particular project or a particular passion of theirs. 24,587. The total amount is from when the organization has been open. So 10 years, right, Dana?
11.
Yeah, we're going for
11 plus.
Yep. And then over 24,000 people have been trained. So this is considered a training. So this is online or in-person trainings that we've done. And then over 2,400 projects have been launched on our website. And the median donation size, I think it's really important to harp on this just for a quick second, because that's a $50 donation. That's not a huge donation. That's not a large size amount of money, but that is still meaningful to people who are donating to these projects. And $50, that means that the average size of a donation is $50, and it all adds up to $9 million. So these are small campaigns with big impacts and small donations that are adding up to large sums of money. Could we go to the next one? And you can always share an idea with us if you want to work with us. It is very simple. It takes 1 minute or less. If it takes you more than a minute, minute and a half to fill out our idea form, you're probably overthinking it. And then that's where our coaching comes into play, because we want to work with you. We want to find out what you're thinking about, what you want to get done. And so the best way to tell us that is to go to ioby.org/idea. You're going to take a moment. You're going to tell us your name, your phone number, your email address, a sentence or two about what it is that you're trying to get done and how much money you need to raise and when you need to raise it by. That's it. And then myself, if you're in Cleveland, or one of my colleagues, will contact you back. We do have a national team that's based out of Brooklyn. So if you're not in one of those cities that has a city action strategist, then the national team will contact you. And then we go from there in helping you get your campaign page up and launched and into crowdfunding. I also want to point out here that we have a special COVID-19 page that is highlighting projects from around the country that have been in response to COVID-19. I think it's a great place to see how community members have responded to taking care of each other in uncertain times. And I think that's the end of my portion, and I'm going to give it to Leyla, right? Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Dawn. Hi, everybody. It's nice to be here with you all from downtown Atlanta. I hope you're all doing okay, as well as you can during this time. I just wanted to give a quick intro to Welcoming America and who I am. Some of y'all know me, some of y'all don't. So I've been a fundraiser for over a decade, and before that, I was in design and marketing for a decade, and I became a fundraiser after I walked into a shelter for homeless kids as a volunteer, and I found my home and my purpose. So since then, I've been raising money for organizations that serve children and vulnerable populations. Now, I've been in my role as Chief Development Officer here at Welcoming America for 2 years, and I lead all aspects of our fundraising, from foundation and institutional donors to corporate and individual giving as well. And I know many of you on our webinar today know who we are, obviously. For those who don't, I just wanted to say that, Welcoming America's mission is to help create communities where everyone feels like they belong, including immigrants and refugees. And in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we established a resilient rapid response initiative back in March. And it was really to be able to provide resources, tools, and connections to our 200 plus welcoming network. And as part of that initiative, includes a rapid response fund, which is really important to us, and it allows us to provide grants to our welcoming network to support them in what is a really hard time, and hopefully build resilience and help us all weather this beyond, you know, the next couple of months. So I know it can feel nebulous sometimes, and especially now, and sometimes it's scary to ask for money. We may not have every answer for you today, but I'm excited to talk to you all. I hope our combined expertise and this platform will answer some of the questions you have and equip you to, after this webinar, to successfully make those asks and raise lots of money. So I'll pass it back to Dana.
Thanks, Leyla. Thanks, Dawn. I also want to acknowledge this is the start of a conversation. We could do all of this. We could talk about this for, you know, weeks. We could talk about it. We could do an all-day session on it. So I'm going to move us quickly because the things what we're going to be talking about and doing, we have to do quickly today, but it's a beginning, and we will look to ways to continue to provide this content to you all, and to flesh out. And like I said, each of these exercises could be their own 3-hour, you know, seminar where we could really dig deeper and explore. I'll invite people to keep sharing names and where you're from if you're able while we're talking. And Anthony, I'll take the next slide. So, you know, again, it's going to sound, I always say this when I do trainings, it sounds almost like Pollyanna-ish, and especially in this moment, but I believe this and I know from experience that it works. So I'm going to share these principles with you and do it quickly. And then we're going to do, as we said, some interactive thinking and exercises together. So people feel tentative, you feel afraid, you feel apprehensive. That's true after being a fundraiser for 20 years. It's hard. It's hard work. Like, there are reasons for that we'll unpack a little bit today, but I'm here to tell you that, again, we'll talk about how you might adjust timeline, how you might adjust messaging. You need to know your audience, right? So it's not okay to ask for anything at any moment of anyone, but it is okay to ask. It's okay to ask for people to support your work. So just, that's simple, but sit with it and take that in. The alternative is leaving money on the table. The alternative is not being resourced to do the work that matters to you. The second thing I want to share also seems obvious, but it really is a principle to take in. People give because they're asked. There are examples, you know, if people don't know that you're looking for support, if tons of people are potential donors out there, and if you're not asking, you're not going to get money from them. I certainly have examples in my own life of things that they might not be at the top of the list of things I would have sought out to support, but it's something that matters. And if someone I know asks me, I'm going to give. If someone who can make the case for why it matters asks me, I'm going to give. So people give because they're asked. If you're not hearing no, you're not asking enough. People get really freaked out, and it's like, I can't bring it up because someone, you know, might not like it. And it's like, what's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is that people can say no to you, and they should. Like, somebody is going to say no if you're asking. That's okay, right? You can weather that. And as we were just talking a little bit as panelists before we started this call, there are ways to iterate on that. If someone really says no and it's loud and clear and it's a hard line, you're not going back to that person, right? You're going to take that in and respect them. And that's okay too. Someone may say, no, not now. Ask me again. It's not a good time for this or that reason. Then you're going to take that in and that's an invitation to come back to them.
Yeah. Dana, I just wanted to add, I always say, you know, if someone says no, I want to hear the no so I can look behind them to the person that's going to say yes. And it doesn't mean I can't go back to the person that said no later, but no means now I know and I can move on.
Yeah. And again, not asking and saying no have the same results. Right? But when you're asking, you're going to get yeses also. So it's about kind of like getting yourself in the mindset to just be doing that. The next one I want to share is that fundraising is organizing. So a lot of people will come into a space where they're learning to fundraise, and you have experience turning people out for events. You have experience turning people out for actions. You have experience calling people to volunteer for things. We're going to talk again about like how money has become weighted in our culture and why that feels more difficult. But if you employ those skills, it really is the same skill. Like, you're asking people to step up. It's either their time or their money. It's either their expertise and their effort or their money. And those things are equivalent. So and also to take in, it's giving people an opportunity to be a part of something meaningful. You'll practice this when you practice your pitches, but if you care, it's an invitation for people to support something that matters. And if you really believe that, then stepping behind that with the belief that that people will appreciate that invitation, whether or not they take you up on it, is something to believe authentically. And that takes us into the last piece, which is that people respond to authentic stories. You may have an organization or a project, and you may have people, 10 people on a solicitation team, and you might write a template for them. I mean, this is what I do all the time for our fundraising, right? You're going to provide them with what your mission is, but those asks might look 10 different ways, and they should, because the way you ask is personal, and it's going to come across if you're asking for what matters to you about that work, right? So as we keep thinking and practicing together over the next 25 minutes or so, and like I said, it's way too short, you're going to think about that. You're going to be thinking about what is the kernel that you're pulling out of the work you're doing, and why it matters in this time, which is part of a pivot that we need to be making right now. And to not immediately say, oh, what we're doing doesn't matter, but like, how are you stepping into the space of what's needed? Because there's a space of a lot that's needed now. And I bet that many of you can find truly authentic stories for how to meet that need. So let's go to the next slide. We're going to go right into an activity. And again, forgive my sniffling. So this is a much longer activity that I do with people that really can be about like digging really deep and sharing. And I wish, in a way, I wish we could be in a space where we could all see each other's faces and really do that. We're not going to have the opportunity to fully do that today, but I want to gesture towards it with you all, which is, doing some reflections. People sometimes do an activity where you build out like your own personal full sort of money story about your relationship to money. We're not going to have time to do that, but this is the beginning of thinking about how it's been kind of inculcated in you that money is inappropriate, it's rude to talk about, it's bad. People say don't talk politics or money, politics, religion, or money. In social settings, and that there are messages that come to us from a pretty early age about how that is and why that is, that we carry forward. And my kind of goal and mission in life is to help you understand that, we live in capitalism. You need money to make your work happen. If you care about that work, you're going to ask people for it as a neutral resource, and that it doesn't have to be and easier said than done, right? It's still hard for all of us, but it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. So I want to ask you to use your chat box. Like I said, we're not going to go into depth with all of our childhood experiences because it's not the time or format to do that. But I want you to just take a minute before you type and think about, just go with me on this journey. It might seem a little woo-woo or something, but I'm going to ask you to think about an early memory of either asking, giving, or being asked for money. So like something that you feel comfortable sharing about perhaps early in life, before you ever even knew that being a fundraiser was a job that you could do, some association that you had maybe in your family or your church or your Girl Scout troop, or among your friends or your school, that had to do with money. And think about it for a moment, and then I'm going to ask for short snippets in the chat box, and we're going to just share a few of those out with each other. Sure. The question is sharing an early association with an early money association in your life. So either being asked for money, giving money, or your own asking. Mm-hmm. So fundraising so a couple people have things in school, selling tickets when you were 12, when you were 15, and you fundraised for a trip. creating a budget, right, in your household. A lot of people talk sometimes in these moments about, you know, sort of allowance or having to create a budget. Asking to a dinner, and he asked for a large gift and he got it, which for me like makes the point of like when asked, people often give, maybe more than they would otherwise, for sure. Yep, Girl Scouts. I was a star Girl Scout cookie seller also.
Yeah. I was a brownie leader, so.
And if you can add, I'm going to add as people continue to type, is there an emotion there, or is there like a feeling or a memory that you have of how that was for you, how that like asking or interaction, and it's not the same for everyone. It's not like everyone got it laid in super deep in the same way, but like, how did it feel to be doing that asking in that time, or to be asked? Nervous, uncomfortable, and then proud when we succeeded. Yep. Couldn't have put it better. Anyone else feel like sharing anything about that association, either another story example or what it felt like? It felt exhausting. Yeah, it's exhausting. I mean, I can't lie and say it's easy. Like I said at the very beginning, fundraising is hard, repetitive work, but I have a lot of enthusiasm for it. I'm the person who always is here to tell you that it can be fun, if not easy. It can be energizing. Yes, saving money is good practice, but the fear of talking about it sets you up for failure. Pizza to raise money, right? We all get so many. It's right. We all do get so many asks, but being afraid of it is not going to help you get in the mix, right? I know you know that, but I think it's like we feel that way, and then it feels overwhelming and easy to turn away from. But we just have to figure out how to kind of keep having an authentic message and trying to distinguish ourselves. And sometimes you will just be one more person. And like I said, not everyone will give. But but discerning what audience is your supporters is important. Yeah, based in male ownership. Yeah.
Yeah. Always felt weird, the need to ask. I understand that.
Yeah. It felt bad at first, but telling them why you needed it, it was easier to accept the money. Yeah.
Yeah, based on systems like male ownership, things like that. Yep.
Yeah.
So like depends on, a lot of people have mentioned like some people have mentioned their home life too. Like you might have a parent who's really conservative with money, or has to be, or is uncomfortable asking for anything, and you embody those characteristics as you grow.
Colleen, this is a great one. Once you've had to fundraise, you're more empathetic and more generous. And I think that's right. And it reminds me of another thing I want to say, which is that there's also a great practice that I left out earlier, which is like, if you're giving to something, it's much easier to ask people to join you in giving as well. And I always say like, it's different if you're an employee, so you might not give to the organization that employs you, you might, but particularly when you're organizing teams of volunteers or board members, depending on what your expectation is of those folks giving, even if it's $1, if you can say to people, like, this is why, like, I'm investing, please join me in investing, that means a lot. And yeah, empathy. Okay, great. We're gonna move to the next activity, and I'm just gonna say another thing or two. Does anyone have any other sort of observations to share about this? A voracious reader. Yeah. Thank you, Fatima. Yeah. That there's anxiety about having your anxiety comes from realizing that you struggled with money early. And sometimes I struggle with that in this exercise, is that, as I said, we live in capitalism, and it's important to acknowledge that, money does have a material impact on people. It's not to be sort of goofy about it and say, it doesn't matter, it doesn't represent anything. It can be a neutral transaction. And it's important for us to try to make it less, sort of, that the way that it's weighted serves, I personally think that the way that it's weighted serves people in power in capitalism. And if we can take some of that put some transparency and take some of that weight off of it. It actually allows us to talk more freely in a way that can be really liberating. But I also think like that's not to say that those experiences and those material effects are not real. So thank you, Fatima. Okay, last call. Thoughts, observations, sharings. Thank you all for being, it's a little vulnerable and it's a little unusual to ask you to do those reflections. You might not have come to this webinar sort of ready or knowing that you'd be asked to do that. I do think that it's something that I ask you to kind of like keep holding this question in the back of your mind, because maybe some of you are very experienced fundraisers and you're like, I don't, this sort of doesn't apply to me, or maybe it feels awkward or weird to do. But I do think that like there's something, there's just something there to like keep thinking on that we can sort of dispel a little bit in order to be able to move forward more effectively in this work. So thanks for going down that path with me. I appreciate you all. I ask you to keep sitting with this after this session today. We're going to move into our next exercise. And feel free to come back to this and keep asking questions and sharing when we get to Q&A. But for now, you're going to get a chance to practice actually how you would step into making asks in this moment by refining a little bit how the ways that, and the pieces of, and how to craft your messaging. And I'm going to toss it over to Dawn to do that with you.
All right, Anthony, can we go to the next slide? So the gist of my work is usually working one-on-one with individuals, sometimes like community groups or small nonprofits who are not experienced in fundraising like at all. And to one of Dana's points earlier, asking people, what I say, she says it very nicely, fundraising is organizing. Yeah. I say asking people for money is a form of organizing. Mm-hmm. I'm so sorry, like my family decided right at this point to have a heated conversation about lunch. So you're all invited. But asking people for money is a form of organizing. And one of the awesome things about ioby, or that I love about ioby, so I used this platform before I started working for the company. And one of the really awesome things that I love about this particular platform is that you can ask people also for other gifts that they may have, because they may not have money, but they may have time. They may have tables and chairs that you can borrow. They may have a desire to get the word out or a good social media network. So there are all these other ways that you can organize around something that you want to get done. But when we're talking about our pitch, when we're talking about, how do you, sort of like land the plane, right? It's this pitch, it's this three-part thing that I coach people on, which is the introduction, exploration, and invitation. The introduction is literally, hey, I'm doing this thing. So when I used ioby, it was, and I actually was introducing people to my idea before I actually started the fundraising campaign. And that's, a little pro tip, like you're priming the pump, you're getting people ready before it goes out to the public. And so this whole introduction about what the challenge or the problem is that you are addressing or that you're trying to solve. In my case, it was around the astronomical functional illiteracy numbers in my community, in the neighborhood that I grew up in and the neighborhood that I live in currently. And it's something like 90%, higher than 90% of the people in this particular neighborhood are functionally illiterate. That's it. And so you want to introduce people to that number. You want to introduce people to what the challenge is. And you may not even have all of the answers about what you want to do about it. And sometimes that introduction can be a great way of sort of crowdsourcing solutions as well. And then this exploration, and that's how we get into exploration. So you're inviting people to explore what that means for community members. You're inviting them to explore what that means for themselves. So that exercise that you just went through with Dana is an example of exploration. Let's explore our relationships with money, because then as we're landing this plane, as we're, keep using that metaphor, we're bringing it in, we're bringing it home. As you're exploring that, you start getting people to think about, well, what can I do? Or can I get on board with what you're trying to do? So this exploration piece of it is super, super important. And then the last piece is the invitation. So the reason that the invitation is super personal to me is because 9 times out of 10, most of the people that I asked to support my particular project had never been asked in a targeted or meaningful and impactful way to contribute to something. So this invitation is like the first step in actually training your donors to give. So you're inviting them to continue the conversation. You're inviting them to donate, even if it's just $5 or $10 or $25 or $50 to this particular project or this particular thing that you believe in. You're inviting them to learn more. You're inviting them to step up and to step out into a particular thing. So and let me just say this, the introduction, exploration, and invitation is a cycle. You can pick up in any one of those spots, because like right now we're living, through a dumpster fire. I'll just call it that. It's just a dumpster fire right now. So you may have already done an introduction with someone and had to pause. So you may have to go back and reintroduce it. Or we were having this conversation earlier, there may be a pivot in how you plan on implementing your work. So now there has to be a reintroduction to how you're going to implement this work, or a invitation to support in a different kind of way. Because, maybe you're not meeting face to face, but you're meeting on Zoom calls. So now the invitation may shift from money to tech support. Mm-hmm. You never know. I know I've needed a lot of tech support the last 2 days just to get my computer up and rerunning again when I thought I had it all figured out. So these things, there's no one, there's no like, you have to do the exploration and then the invitation. You can pick up and drop down wherever you need to. So it's kind of in and out. I want to point to this link down here at the bottom. ioby does have a bunch of free tools and information around how to build your strategy. And we're talking about storytelling. This is really what this is. When you're pitching, when you're crafting your pitch, when you're crafting your pitch, it really boils down to telling that authentic story. And I love the leader toolkit and the your story section, simply because it breaks down what goes into making those stories work. Everything from being an authority on what you're talking about, to keeping it general, but also drilling it down to something narrow and attainable that people can touch and taste and feel. And then there's also, and I'll reiterate something that Dana said, which is tell the story differently based on your audience. Read your audience, read your audience, read your audience. It is strange and unprecedented times right now, but whatever was important before all of this stuff happened, it is still important now. So let's not be afraid of asking, but you may have to adjust how you ask. You may have to adjust timing in when you ask, but these 3 things are, to me, like bedrock to crafting a solid pitch. And then you get practice in it pretty quickly. So the thing that I want to ask you all to do is if you could share a little bit. Like I think like it's either the introduction, exploration, or the invitation. And if you're feeling a little leery about any of those, I would invite you to stretch into those right now. Like, give us a sentence or two and let us know which one you're doing around. Is it an exploration? Is it an introduction to something that you would be asking, that you would be fundraising around, or is it an invitation? And so an example of an invitation, I think, is like, go to our website and click donate, like give people very specific instructions on the invitation. We're having a Zoom call, or we're doing a webinar on this date and time. That's a very specific invitation. It comes with instructions. Introduction is, hey, can I talk to you about, would you like to learn more? You know, things like that, like you're introducing this thing. And exploration is somewhere in between the two, which is like, it's not necessarily committal. It's not asking people to do something specifically like give or attend something. It is, for more information, you can go here. So I hope that explains those parts, but I would love for us to take a minute or two, think about it, and maybe drop in the chat your attempt at one of these parts, or all three of them. Sometimes the pitch can literally be all three if you're savvy at it, or you know that like people don't have a whole lot of time. Ooh, we got one here.
Yeah. And I just want to say one thing, John. People are, we know that people, another way that we don't have enough time to go as deep as we could is that we know that people are at different stages of fundraising experience, and we're trying to kind of acknowledge that across the board. So it's knowing your audience, it's knowing yourself, and what you connect to in the work. And it's also sort of deploying this wherever you're at with the size of your organization. I know people asked in advance questions about major donors. We mentioned a lot about having small gifts, and we mentioned about first-time fundraisers, but these things apply. Like, it's like, as I said, as a fundraising for 20 years, I have to do the same things that I did when I started out. So people are having hesitation for a lot of reasons. You're with us today for the reason of wanting to kind of get some support to do this more. And even if you've been doing it and you have a lot of experience under your belt, it's about using this to reconnect with why you're asking and what you're asking. So I encourage you to kind of like come along on this journey with us, even if you, are asking for $10,000 or even if, or, $50,000, or even if you've been doing this for many decades.
Yeah, I think people want to see themselves in the work. Like, they want to see how, they want to make that personal connection to why you're asking. And then for those that, especially for major gifts, they're entrusting you with their money to do what they can't do. So that's important, to be able to share with them what this money is going to do and how it's going to make an impact, and be sure to report back that impact too, because that will keep it going. There's nothing worse than asking for money, you give someone money and then you never hear another thing. That's not a good feeling. So
Suzanne, sorry, there's an E at the end. I think that's Suzanne. She submitted one to the panelists. I'm not sure that all the attendees saw it, but it said Ed Snaps works with underserved female identifying middle and high school students, offering unique STEM content programs all year round. Can I share with you how we perform our hands-on experiments online? I love that, because it's not asking for money right away. What it's asking is can I explore with you how we deliver our services? So like, it may not always start out with money. It may just be, can I really introduce you to this? Can I tell you why I love it? Because you know me or whatever. And I really, I got it in the correct manner. Thank you. She said I pronounced for pronouncing Ed Snaps in the correct manner. So sometimes that exploration or the introduction or even the invitation does not land at money first. So like, especially if you're feeling leery about asking for money, maybe you dial back what the ask is for first, especially in the introduction and the exploration, and you're training your donors, you're training people, everything moves at the speed of trust. So you're building trust, you're building relationships, and then the donations become a little bit easier because you have more of a familiarity with the people that you're working with.
The other thing I want to add in this moment too is to not, we keep sort of saying this in different ways, but to not turn away from why your work matters, because there's so much else out there that's pressing. And that might mean, it's not that, you know, funding Black-led racial justice organizations right now doesn't matter most, or that funding specific COVID response work doesn't matter most. You're probably not going to make these asks this week, right? So it's about like, you're probably not going to make the asks of someone whose parent is in the hospital this week. Like, you're not going to make the asks of someone who, you know, it's knowing the audience and it's knowing the timing. And it's also, so you're going to stagger these out in a way that makes sense, but also it's about connecting authentically with what's really happening out there. So if you're pivoting the work, you don't want to say, we're addressing, you know, what's happening in this moment if you're not. But I imagine that most of your missions, because you do work that's in social change space, is actually super relevant to building the world we want under the conditions that we're being sort of assaulted with right now, right? So it's about not exploiting and sort of capitalizing on the moment, but as we can emerge again to be making these asks in the coming days and weeks, how are you going to lift up the work that your organization is authentically doing to address the kind of trauma that we're experiencing? Do other people have things to share? Because I also think, Dawn, what Dawn is doing here is helpful. These are real ways that you can use these messages to then build out solicitation. So we want you to get to practice, and we just have about 2 minutes left for this section. So I see a lot of like, this is what we do and sharing a mission. What about like, I do this work because? What about like a little bit of a couple of lines of a personal, like, this is why this matters to me, this is why this matters in the world? I mean, that's in here. I'm not saying no, but what if we get some of those personally framed things?
Well, I even like this one that came from Fatima about leading with like cause and action.
Yep.
So the governor has lifted the stay-at-home order in Michigan. Like,
Yep.
that's
The
something that you can,
is there.
right? There's this urgency, there's this cause. Like, you're driving the point home with this thing that is affecting everyone. Like, and that's another thing. Like, when you're doing an invitation, sometimes you don't have a lot of time to build those relationships up. So when you're making an invitation like this, that invitation is really targeted and pointed, and you're starting with, hey, this thing just happened.
Yeah.
Like,
and specifically what it'll cover. I mean, you can't always say the money will go to X, Y, or Z, but it's helpful when you're saying it's putting a roof over the heads of folks, it's going to pay for 1 month's rent. You know, the places where that can be measurable is always compelling too.
Yeah, that's right. When it's concrete, the more concrete you can be, I think it's a plus. And I know not everyone has direct, does service, but the more you can do that and be clear about the investment that you need, the more successful you'll be.
So just 60 more seconds of sharing some of these things in the way that's most helpful. And then we're going right into Q&A and conversation with you all, and we have limited time. So I'm gonna invite you, Dawn, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and for doing this activity. And I'm gonna invite people to close out some sharing about these pitches. Again, we could do 5 hours on just this. So hold on to this and we'll be able to provide more content and training and practice for this. And then let's also start queuing up questions. People can be dropping questions right now that you have for us to talk about, because we're only going to be able to have time to take a few, and those should get in there now.
So Suzanne put in here really quickly. She said, I do this work because we need to increase diversity in the STEM workforce, and talking the talk does not help this cause. And then she goes into talking about what Ed Snaps is walking the walk and working directly with the underserved female identifying students. And I really like this one. And I would even add that you can make it even more personal. Like if this is something that has directly affected you, in a sense, like for me, you know, it's not just literacy, like, but it's my neighbors. Right. So I shifted my project to it's not just like adult literacy or childhood literacy, it's community literacy. And I live amongst these people and these are my neighbors and I want them to be well. So when you're making it personal, adding, you know, that piece that, you know, like, again, people are walking the walk, people are talking the talk. And so those personal touches really do go a long way with like authenticity and showing that you are not only an expert in a particular area, but that you are really passionate about it. And then, you know, it just makes it easier for the ask.
Yeah, today I like I've never seen more of a need. Alistair, today I'm asking you to make a commitment. I like today or now. Yeah. And honestly, in my 10 years, I've never seen a greater need. Yeah. And this, by the way, this is about writing these pitches. It's also about, for some of you, you're having meetings with donors. Well, you're not having meetings now, but you're having maybe calls or Zoom calls and eventually, again, coffees or meals with people to sit down and ask for bigger gifts. And this is what you're going to bring when you speak to people as a script. Let's start taking questions. So I'm going to encourage you again in the chat box to share any questions you have for us. We'll just get to a couple of them and then we'll be available to answer other questions after this because we know that time is tight.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute myself. So yeah, so as Dana said, we'll go ahead and take some questions here. We've had a couple that have come in. I'm going to start with the time that remains here, but again, definitely keep your questions coming. One question here that I'd be interested to see how you all can respond to is in regards to moving in-person fundraising to online. Because I think that's what we're all doing right now. Obviously, we're not, like you said, we can't meet for coffee and tea and dinners and things. So the question being, how do you keep people engaged and make that ask online?
So I'll say real quick and then I'll let other folks say, and then I think we're gonna have to keep taking other questions afterwards because time is flying. I think, look, you can do regular campaigns by sending emails, but in terms of, I see Alistair is asking this, so I'm going to address the question to this, virtual events. You know, a lot of people are asking this question. We actually had our biggest ioby event planned for June. We're contemplating doing something in the winter that would be online instead. I think it's about know your audience, know your audience, know your audience. So I heard this morning about, you know, Welcoming America did what sounds like a fabulous online dance party. Do you have people who would come to a dance party and dance at their screens? Is that something that works for the crowd you have? What music are you going to play if you do that? Is it a crowd where your event is usually social and that's something that like people will take to? Or is it something where people come to sit in their seats and watch an awards event, and therefore do you need to record some speeches and some talks where you're going to make a pitch and do that instead and have it be something where people are a captive audience? So I think there are a lot of options springing up that are really, again, it's an art, not a science. It's like I say, like, oh, it's not brain surgery. And I don't mean that it's not hard. It's just that there's no one thing that works. It's like you're going to try out switching what you would do anyway onto a platform for the type of feel that people are coming to do at your events. I know we're also exploring doing, for example, online house parties. So you're not going to have like the schmoozing time as much, but you're going to take that small group and do some kind of conversation and some kind of presentation like you would do in someone's home for, let's say, 10 or 20 people. Platforms specifically, there are some new ones out there that I've seen. I mean, Zoom, we know how Zoom works. We sometimes use GoToWebinar at ioby. I've also seen there's a new platform called Icebreaker, but it is a platform where you can present to people as a group, and then you can do breakouts one-on-one if you want to do questions and sharing that are mingling. So that's just some thoughts. I'm not an expert on platforms, but that's some thoughts on that. Leyla and Dawn?
Yeah, I was also going to say there's no like embedded necessarily giving option in this, but a really good platform to connect with others is civic dinners. And, you know, there's a Eventbrite that goes out, I believe, with that you can embed fundraising into. That's been a really great way to connect small groups of people. If you want to have like a cafe style, your constituency is not like the partying type necessarily, I don't know, to do a dance party maybe. We've had
awesome. I didn't even know that. One more.
Yeah, and I was going to say really quickly that even if we were meeting face to face, I would never tell anyone to rely on any one platform or any one way of asking. So if, like, I would never text my mother, as an example. I would never text my mother and ask her to donate to something because I might get a crystal ball emoji as a response. And like, because she's just not good at texting, it's hilarious. So I would call her and then I would have to walk her through the process, or she would just be like, well, can't you just come and get this $20 from me and deposit it on my behalf? So those things are still gonna be there. Like, I know that there are people who will, you know, look at the phone ring and then text you back like, hey, what's up? So you still have to craft multi-dimensional ways of asking people. So, you know, I guess the idea of like, if you build it, they will come. And if you just post it on your Facebook page, that automatically people are gonna, you know, show up at an event or automatically donate. That's not necessarily true. So and there are people who are just not on social media or on different platforms of social media. So you have to be able to craft several different asks and ask people in different ways, just based off of where you're going to be contacting them and how they prefer to be contacted.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's 1:58. That is sage advice to end with. I'm going to encourage you see on the screen our email addresses. Please follow up with us directly if you wish, or share with Anthony or Leyla any questions that you have. We're in this together. It's a tough time. We're all figuring it out. So we're here for you. And we want to continue the conversation. So we look forward to more questions from you. I'm going to thank you all again for your time today. Thank you for your generosity of participation, listening, generosity of spirit. Thank you for the work you do. It matters. And raising funds for our work is the only way we're going to keep it going in a way that's going to keep us strong and give our communities what they need. And I wish everyone wellness, safety, and you know, to kind of find the space to take care of yourselves over the coming days, because it is such a hard time. So again, thanks for spending an hour with us this afternoon. You'll get a survey after this that'll help us a lot if you can if you can fill it out quickly in building out this program going forward. And remember, we'd love to hear from you. And thanks, Welcoming America, for doing this together with ioby. And Anthony, yeah. I'll let you have the last word.
Thanks so much, Dana, Dawn, and Leyla, all three of you. Thank you so much. A lot of great information, a lot of good comments coming in from our attendees, so thank you for that. It does look like we have a couple of questions that we didn't have time to get to, but as Dana said, we will definitely follow up with you. There's some really good questions there, so we'll make sure that we do follow up. In closing, just want to make you aware of our next webinar for our Welcoming America members. It's coming up this Thursday, so just here in a couple of days. It's going to be at 1 o'clock again. And this is Understanding Immigrant Exclusions in the COVID-19 Relief Bills and How Local Communities Can Fill Those Gaps. This is going to be another great webinar. We're going to have our main speaker from the National Immigration Law Center, as well as some members from the Welcoming Network that are going to be sharing how they work to advocate for immigrant rights, especially within the COVID relief efforts, and how they've developed local funds to provide financial supports to households, businesses, and nonprofits. So kind of tied in a little bit to what we're discussing here, but if you can join for that, please do. Again, Welcoming America members, you probably received the email promotion on this. but we'll also share the registration link with the post-webinar email that we'll send out for today's webinar. And then just quickly too, as Dawn stated, this has been recorded, so we will be following up and sending you a link to the recording. Sorry, I just closed that out. Let me get that back up here. So we will get to that recording to you, as well as any of the resources that we have there. And bear with me while I click through and get it.
If you found it useful, please share the recording with folks.
Yeah, and the other thing too is, as Dawn said, or Dana said, we are going to have a survey that will come up just as soon as we close out here. Please take a moment to fill that out. That really helps us make sure that we're getting you the information and resources that you need. So take the time to do that if you would. So again, in closing, thank you to Dana, Dawn, and Leyla, and thank you to everyone that joined and stayed on with us here today. We really appreciate your time, and on behalf of all of our speakers today, stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Be in touch.